What's up, everyone? So now we're going to take a look at how to deploy network access using ISE as the radius server. We're going to use 802.1x and MAB on switch 2, and we want to enable 802.1x on the port connected to PC12, and so that the user identity is going to be validated against the active domain. ISE is already connected the active domain. As for the port where is connected PC45, we're going to enable MAB. And so let's start by enabling the supplicant on PC12, as we don't need to do it on Windows 45. So the PCs I have already joined the active domain as well. So I have two accounts created. I have Celesio and Carvalho, and Celesio is part of group IT. As for Carvalho is part of marketing group. So the first thing we want to do is to enable the service 802.1x or wired LAN config. That should be somewhere here at the bottom. Wired LAN. There we go. And we want to start this service, and let's make it automatic. That starts running automatically. And now let's look at the interface. There are some settings we have to adjust. So right now the PC is trying to authenticate itself, but the switch is not enabled to send those requests to ISE yet. And we have to confirm that this checkbox is enabled. And here on settings, make sure that this box is clear. And we're going to use Windows logon names. So just make sure that it's selected, and the authentication mode is going to be user or computer authentication. We're going to press OK and just reboot it. And now let's jump onto the switch and start configuring. And so there is a lot to be done, and the first thing we want to enable AAA, and we want to create the radius server to be ISE, and the address to be 170.10.1. As for authentication, I'll be using 1812 ports. For accounting, 1813. Now, the key is going to be CCIE 65745. Now I want to add this server to a radius group server, and really group server radius, yes, I'm just going to name it radius group, and the server name is going to be ISE. The requests using VLAN 1. Now let's add some radius attributes, and I'm going to use 6. That's on for login, and 8 including access request, and the other one, that's dead criteria. Check it. The seconds to wait, and if it doesn't get a response in this time, try it 3 times, and consider timeout in 2 minutes. As for AAA authentication, for .1x, we're going to use default authentication list, and the group is going to be radius group created. For authorization, network default is going to use radius group, and we want to enable accounting as well, and periodic update in, say, every 2 minutes, and we want to enable accounting for .1x and using the same authentication list at the beginning and at the end. Going to reference radius server that we created. Now we want to enable for re-authentication. That's place server radius dynamic author, and the client's going to be ISE 1, and the server key is going to be 5745. And now let's enable .1x and hit device tracking. Okay, now at the port level, start with G01. So this is connected to PC12 and make it an access port. As for authentication modes, that's host modes, going to be mode authentication, and the port control is going to be auto, and let's enable .1x authentication and set a timeout transmission period, and we want to make this port down, and that's it. Okay, so now going to 10, and so this connects to PC45, make an access port, and the authentication host mode going to be mode authentication, and port control is going to be auto, and we have to authenticate. We have to, is it authentication open? Yes. We want to allow access before being authorized, otherwise the packets won't be sent, and have to shut this port as well. Okay, so yes, both ports are down. So now let's go over ISE and let's add the switch. And the switch is going to be part of an existing group. So the switch IP is 10.0.7.2. Let's say this is iOS and 15 something, and here device type belongs to switches groups, and we want to enable radius authentication, and we set the same key we did using on the switch, and we're going to save this, and the switch is enabled. Now what we want is to create the conditions based on the end users, based on .1x and MAB is going to be authenticated. So we want that initially the domain users or domain computers to be allowed to access the network, to at least to be able to reach the active domain and DHCP server. So we're going to create a profile. Once the user gets authenticated, is going to be authorized to reach those services. So first we want to create a dynamic ACL for that. Let's call it dynamic AD-DACL. So we want to allow permit UDP from any on port 68 to 67, and we want to permit from any to our domain server, that's 10 117.20. Let's check, it's correct. And once the user gets authenticated, if it belongs to IT department, you should be able to access all the network resources. So I'm going to name it IT dynamic IACL, and it's going to be permit IP any. Let's check valid. Okay. As for MAB, the device initially is going to be, or once it's authenticated, is going to be allowed to access DHCP service only. So MAB DHCL, we want to allow permit UDP EQ68 and permit UDP from any source on port 68 to any destination port 67. And let's check, and that's valid. Now let's associate those dynamic ACLs to the authorization profiles. And so let's call it, we have AD authorization profile. Going to copy this, and ACL is going to be AD. That's for IT. I got it. Yes, is going to be applied the dynamic ACL IT, and for MAB it's going to be what is it? MAB dynamic ACL. Okay, this is done. Now we're okay to start building the policy, except that we don't know yet the MAC address of PC45, and we'll know it once it tries to access. And once we get the MAC address, we're going to associate with an endpoint identity group. So we can already create the endpoint identity groups. So for that, we'll be using groups, endpoint identity group, and we're going to name it marketing endpoint identity group, because let's just say that all the users that will be using this PC, they are part of marketing departments. So let's submit this and start building our policy. So let's begin with a name. It's going to be corporate policy, and we're going to select only requests coming from switches. We're going to use it, and we're going to allow default network access. Now the requests, they will be authenticated against all ID stores, meaning ISE database and Active Directory. As for authorization, so first we want to allow AD, let's call it policy or authorization policy. authorization policy. This makes easier during troubleshooting. Allow AD, that's my authorization policy. And we want to initially only allow domain computers. So if it's a domain computer, just going to place on AD authorization profile. And let me replicate these below. And the other one will be for IT. Let me remove this. So this is going to be for IT. Really. And what I want to check is if it belongs to IT department and it's 802.1x, then it's going to be assigned IT authorization profile. And we want to duplicate this below, and we're going to call it marketing authorization policy. And here what we want to check is the endpoint identity group, and it has to be from marketing endpoint identity group, and we want to check whether it's wired MAB. So these two conditions that we have to be true in order to be authorized, and we're going to associate with MAB authorization profile. And we can save this. So now let's monitor the logs. Okay, so let's start with PC12 by enabling its ports. So G01, let's say no shut. Should be getting some logs from the switch. Let me enable do debug, and that should be .1x. Oh, and try. We just reboot it. .1x, and okay, we can see the requests coming, and we see that the PC was already authenticated and authorized, and the AD ACL, dynamic ACL, was deployed on the switch. Okay, that's great. So that's what we want. Now I have a lot of noise here. If I can stop this. Okay, so when we try to log in, so right now only the computer has access to reach to query the domain. So let's try to log in using Carvalho. So Carvalho is part of marketing department. So what we want to see is a deny response from ISE, because only Celesio, because it's part of IT department, should be allowed to access the network on this port. So we should see a log message here, and we see that Carvalho was denied access because Carvalho is part of another group, and our policy is expecting Silesi or someone from the IT group to log in on this computer. So our policy is working as expected. So now let me restart this, and we'll try to log in as Celesio. The PC already sent the log out message to ISE, So only now the computer is being authorized. Okay, so now let's try to log in as user. Let me see. So it is the ACL. So right now we should see this ACL, and if I can grab it, no, I can't. Well, okay, but let's try to log in as Celesio and see what's going to be the response. Okay, so let's switch to Celesio. So the message is going to be sent to ISE, and ISE is validating that, okay, he's known and he's allowed, and we see that IT dynamic ACL was sent to the switch, and it is matching our authorization policy, IT authorization, and this is the profile assigned to that user. So if we look for the ACL, you can see permit IP dynamic ACL, and can take a look deeper, and that should be authentication session D01 detail. You can see what's the IP assigned, the username, MAC address, the status, and the ACL apply, and method is .1x and was authenticated with success. So we can check the IP. And we're good to go. So now let's go to PC45. And let me shut this interface for a minute. Go to 10 and let's bring the interface up. You can see that the PC is being denied access because its identity group is unknown. So now what we're going to do is add this endpoint to Martin identity group, the group identity group we created earlier, and that's the MAC address. So we want to, so let's edit and perform a static assignment, and let's choose Windows and workstation, and we're going to assign to Martin static identity group, and now it should be authorized to access the networks. So right now we see fail, but now it's going to try to authenticate, and let me see if I'm using the right one. Yes, even before logging into the machine, it should be already authorized to access the networks. So right now still trying. So give us some time, and we see that he was authorized and is hitting the defined authorization profile, and we can take a look at the details. It was successful authorization. That's the authorization profile sign. And what else? An ACL, dynamic ACL, was downloaded to the switch, so we can confirm that as well. So to show bring previous commands, so I just have to change to 10. We can see that is authorized. That's the IP. The username is MAC address, and the ACL is IP MAB dynamic ACL that we defined earlier. So you can see the ACL applied. What is it? So that's default. There we go. And we have it. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.